All right, well, we have a nice round number present with the presenters. Are you guys ready?
Sure.
All right, perfect. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am Kristen Mullen from the Women's Studies Research Center in the Knisnik Gallery. The WSRC advances knowledge, public dialogue, and social justice through interdisciplinary inquiry in the creative arts focused on women, gender, and sexuality. All of our programs, research, art, activism, and creativity are made possible through the support of generous donors. Please visit our giving page and consider making a donation to the WSRC to help us further our mission of gender equality in the world. If you're interested in staying in touch, you can sign up for our WSRC and mailing outs list. The link is in the chat box. Tonight, I am so happy to welcome you to our virtual program, Damsel in Charge, Inventing a Powerful Female Archetype, with WSRC scholar Donna Dodson and award-winning animator Trina Baker, who are joined by several of their research assistants. Before I hand off the mic, let me share that auto closed captioning will be generated during this event, which you can toggle on and off through your controls. We ask that all questions be put into the chat, and they will be read and answered at the end of the presentation. Now, allow me to hand you over to Harleen Singh, the director of the Brandeis University Women's Studies Research Center, as well as the Brandeis University Associate Professor of South Asian Studies and Literature, Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. Harleen?
Thank you. I was just trying to stay on mute while the dog and the daughter get out of the door. You'll hear them in the background. Good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today with all of you. Thank you so much for inviting me to this. Thank you so much, Donna, and thank you so much, Trina, for this work and for this event that you're putting on. The Women's Studies Research Center, as you all know, has been in existence for the last 20 years with the support of many of you and our supporters around the world. But it's mainly been in existence because of the exciting work that our scholars do and the wonderful directions in which the art, research, and activism takes us all, committing to women's studies and to gender and sexuality. So it's my real pleasure to be able to introduce this work and introduce these artists, but also to say, and Donna will forgive me for this, because I first heard from Donna when I knew that I was coming into the Women's Studies Research Center, and Donna reached out to me because actually my first book was on the Queen of Jhansi, the Rani of Jhansi, who led her troops into battle against the British. And Donna wrote to me and said, I'm working on this figure. And it was heartwarming. I mean, you know, she's well known in India, but she's not well known around the world. And it was just one of those wonderful moments when, you know, the work that you do and the human connection that it makes you feel like somebody hears you. And then to be actually able to go to see Donna's work in the gallery and to see this gorgeous, strong wooden figure standing there, the figure of my imagination and my archive and my work and of my childhood there in a gallery in Boston. It was just a wonderful moment. So Donna, forgive me for that personal digression there for a little bit, but now I will introduce in full. I'd like to start first of all by introducing Katrina Baker. Katrina Baker is an associate professor and chair of animation and motion media at Leslie Art and Design, an animator, book artist, and painter. She researches fairy tales as they relate to the complexities of life, marriage, abandonment, abuse, friendship, and death. The other work focuses on social justice, sexual assault, domestic violence, immigration, and factory farming. Katrina holds a BA degree from Mount Holyoke, a BFA from Maine College of Art and Painting, and an MFA from the University of Pennsylvania in Animation and Painting. Has been awarded numerous grants for her projects, and her works have been shown nationally in galleries as well as in private and corporate collections. Her animations have received national and international accolades that include an International Platinum Pixie Award and 2 International Cinema in Industry Awards. We're so happy to have you here today. Our other presenter today is, of course, our very own scholar from the Women's Studies Research Center, Donna Dodson, an American sculptor who has exhibited her artwork around the world. Currently a resident scholar at the Women's Studies Research Center, Donna's recent show, The Amazons Among Us, at the Boston Sculptors Gallery was met with critical acclaim and great sentimental attachment for me. Donna will be a Fulbright US scholar in Vienna, Austria, working in collaboration with Trina as an artist in residence at Tricky Women, Tricky Realities, what a great name, the world's only animation festival for women in 2022. A graduate of Wellesley College, her forthcoming paper, What Do We Call Courageous Women, will be presented at the Society for Classical Studies annual meeting in January 2022. And I don't want to take up any more airtime, and I turn the podium, the mic, the mute button over to Donna and Trina. Thank you so much for inviting me to this.
Thank you, Harleen. That was a wonderful introduction. And I love the personal story. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you very much.
So yeah, I'd like to begin and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And I think we'll just dive right in to our presentation. I'm going to share my screen and let's see from the beginning. So tonight we're going to really be talking about the role of research in the visual arts as it pertains to my sculpture, as well as to obviously the animation process. And so as Harleen was mentioning, I've been a visiting scholar for 2 years at the Brandeis Women's Studies Research Center. This is my first year as a resident scholar. So I'm really pleased and fortunate that I've been able to continue my work at the center. The first 2 years, I was really involved in researching to create a new body work in sculpture and wood, which is my primary medium. So I'd like to begin and do a little intro about that work, and then we'll go into Trina talking about what the process is of translating a wooden sculpture into a digital animation. And then we will invite all of our students who've been working with us this semester to really talk about the current phase of this project. So some of you may be familiar, animation is often a team process. And so at the end, we'll have a longer discussion about collaborating and we'll take questions at that point. So just going to dive right in. I was very interested in the idea of translating Durr's Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse into Amazon warriors in wood sculpture. I'm inspired by a number of, Xena the warrior princesses and other strong female icons. And particularly, I think, spurred on by some of the more recent live action films, such as Wa Mulan, Tomarus, Manikarnika, and of course, Wonder Woman. And so that, and of course, when we talk about those things, we're talking about pop culture, we're talking about ancient Amazons, women warriors from around the world, as well as sculptures. And so the first sculpture I made, my inspiration was really my great aunt Alice. She was one of the first 40 women from Illinois to enroll in the wax. My mother had saved a lot of her pictures. And so as I was looking into her personal history, I found out that the military had used Athena's helmet on their uniforms. And that just really fascinated me. And so I extended my research to include Athena, a goddess of war and wisdom, who's often portrayed with these metallic breastplates. And so the first sculpture I made in this series is Alpha Female. She is an eagle-headed sculpture honoring my great aunt's military service. She has the metallic breastplates of Athena, and she has the tattoo of Athena's helmet. And so for all the sculptures, I decided I would keep the idea of a tattoo, since scholars believe that the ancient Amazons tattooed their bodies. So that theme permeates all of my wood sculptures in this series. The second sculpture I decided to make was, again, kind of jumping off of the recent live action film Black Panther. A lot of scholars believe the women warriors, the Doja Milaje in that movie, were based on the historic Dahomey Amazons from Western Africa. And so as I looked further into Black Panther, the movie, I came across some research where Ta-Nehisi Coates had brought in additional writers to expand the breadth of the characters in the movie and in the comic strips. I'm sorry, not the movie, the comic strips. So at one point, Roxane Gay was asked to write an issue called The World of Wakanda. And in her comic strip, she, two of her female characters are actually lovers. And so she creates these lesbian characters that didn't make it into the movie. And so that kind of spurred me on to create these two women lovers in my series. And so on the left is Black Panther, kind of asking the question, what if Black Panther was the protagonist of the movie? And one of the female characters was the protagonist. And then on the right is Sibylle, her lover. And she has the Labrys axes on her chariot. And these are both wood carvings. Sibylle is a Roman goddess. She reminds me also of the Egyptian goddess Sekhmet. Sometimes she's portrayed in a throne flanked by lions, or sometimes in a chariot drawn by lions. And so this is just an image of me carving. I use traditional chainsaw, chisels, mallets, rasps. I work with logs and transform them into sculptures. So for these two sculptures, Black Panther and Sibylle, I decided to create matching tattoos for them. And so they have a traditional women's symbol, but then instead of a raised fist, they have a raised lion's paw print in them for my two fictional characters. And the fourth sculpture in this series is one that Harleen referenced. It's very intimidating to have a world-renowned scholar in this particular subject. I hope I did her justice in my work. This is a very famous composition that goes with the myth or story that as she escaped the British surrounding her castle, she strapped her son to her back, grabbed her sword, leapt up the castle wall, and landed on her horse and rode away, escaping the British temporarily, although she did eventually meet them in battle and perish in battle. And so the top is the flag of India, which gives you a sense of my color composition for this piece. Her married name is Lakshmi Bai. There's also an Indian goddess named Lakshmi, is associated with lotus flowers, who are very beautiful but grow in swamps, and so they have grit associated with them and strength. And then of course these are some of my inspirations: the Bengal tiger, which is often a national symbol of India, and then of course thinking about tigers in pop culture, such as the cartoon from Jungle Boy. And so again, there was actually a pair of live action films in the last couple of years about the warrior queen of Jhansi. So she has made it to the shores of the United States. I'm not sure, and for me, it was interesting because there was actually an American version and also a Hindi version that were somewhat released around the same time, very different takes on the subject. And so my sculpture is this one with the tiger head, the boy, the cub, the child cub, the lotus tattoo, and then the green shoes and the white sash referencing the flag of India. And we did present this work, as Harleen was mentioning, in May and June of last year. We also presented Trina Baker's work, her drawings, her animation. Another resident scholar at Brandeis University, Kay Melchor Quick Hall's poems, where she responded to each sculpture separately with its own poem, and then the performance artist Cledia Spiro. And so this was our show. And then what didn't make it into the show is the fifth sculpture, which I haven't finished yet, but I'll just mention, it's always good to mention work in progress. And so this is on the right is the former sculpture I made of a snake-headed figure called Snake Charmer. She has on cowboy boots because typically you wear cowboy boots to prevent a rattlesnake from biting your ankles. And then on the left is the goddess Kali, who's associated with life and also with death and destruction. And again, there was another live action film about Tamaris, who is a Turkish warrior queen. There is a lot of art historical images associated with her. For me, she also brings to mind the sculpture on the left, which is Cuatlicue, which is a Mexican double-headed snake goddess, has a lot of symbolism again with life and death. And so this is a sculpture, it's in progress. I imagine that she will have a skull around her neck. She is famously noted for defeating Cyrus the Great, and a lot of the compositions in art history showing her dunking his head in a vat of blood, saying, now you can have your fill, because she felt like he was very bloodthirsty. And so I think I'll just stop there because we have a lot of material to cover. And I'd like to introduce Trina. Would you like to talk about our collaboration?
Sure, that'd be great. Yeah, so the best thing about collaboration is it takes you in a place that you've never been before. So this is all new territory for me. I've never really collaborated for a sculptor before, and sculpture is actually my weakest subject. So this is wonderful because I feel like every time that we work together, I'm constantly growing. And then also this opportunity to work with the student scholars and with the interns from Leslie, it's just been really expansive. And again, that's why I'm in education, is so that I can continue to learn constantly. And so I'm going to take you all through a little bit of the animation pipeline and talk to you about how we incorporate research into the work that we do. The next slide that we have is, and so I know Donna's going to work the PowerPoint, and I'll blab. So this is a short little process of the collaborative process from Donna's model to my animation. Looking at her model, I think about the action that will happen. Usually I have to act that out and then draw it by hand. And then it goes into modeling it and puppeting it. Then here is a render of the process. And one of the test final renders. It's not the final, but one of the test ones. And in the animation process, it's constantly an iterative process. It is never done. You just run out of time. And as Donna said before, animation is a team sport. And I have to, I definitely have to thank another professor collaborator, Professor Huber, who has been wonderful to do the lighting and rendering for this project as well. So the next couple of slides, I'm just going to sort of break down that process for you and start with some embarrassing things. So when Donna and I talked about the inspiration and the research, one of the research for Alpha Female's spin was Wonder Woman's spin. So here is me acting out Wonder Woman doing the spin and then coming down to the crouch at the end where she is protecting herself. And then go from there to a student pointed out to me later that it would have been good if I rotoscoped this, but I didn't. I drew each one by hand. I broke down the keyframes and in just drawing them freehand from the video. And for me, the drawing process helps me understand where the weight and twist and action is, because I can really study that line of action. And that's the line of action that when I animate, I'm trying to get through in the puppet. So then that comes to the puppet or the modeling. And so then it is always humbling to try to model of a digital sculpture of a sculptor, because again, doing sculpture is not my main medium, and to do it for a sculptor of their own sculpture can be intimidating. So this is alpha female, and as you'll see, she has some little arrows. This is actually what we use. We call this a rig, and it's used for puppeting. And in the next one, you can actually see what the character will do with the rig as it's puppeted. So, and again, I keep referring to it as puppeting because it really feels like that. The up arrow will move the wing, and then you keyframe it, and then you move another piece and you keyframe it. And the magic of the computer is it will do the in-betweens for you. So there's lots of other things that go on under the hood, but that would involve taking you into an animation class. After this, we have to sort of think about the words, or think about the world in which we put these characters. And as Donna had said earlier, Melchior Hall was the poet that showed with us at the Boston Sculptors Gallery this spring, and wrote some wonderful words about all of Donna's sculptures. And I think the next slide is some of the words and thoughts that she had on her responses to Donna's sculptures. So I went from some of these words and then delving into a little more of the research of Athena, and some of the research that was also done from our student scholars. Serenity had some wonderful words that she had discovered that we.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. I think Melchior has been able to join us.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, I think
I'm going to stop here and let Melchior talk.
We're gonna, sorry, that was a little awkward. Melchior, would you like to read your beautiful poem? This is only one of several.
Melchior,
Sure,
thank
no
you.
problem.
So good to see you, and sorry.
No, good to see you
blabbing
too.
Away.
And I just so that other people know, the words that are written in bold were common for all of the for the whole series, and so those words showed up in all of the poems that went with the sculptures. So this one is called Alpha. Strong women. I'm sorry, Mom, can you mute your phone so that I'm not hearing an echo? Oh, shoot. Sorry about that. Alpha, strong women, leagues of auxiliary, essential workers, wearing practical shoes, long days, muscular legs, strong and feminine, warrior and princess, civility and civics, patriotically underpaid. Sculpt resistance, nursing nations, refusing milking, chest plates, breast aches, women's stands, looking toward horizons, insisting on humanity. Animate history, part eagle, part cow, eating last, feeding others, body foraging, feeding bodies, making sustenance, taking substance, markings of a warrior goddess. Perform futures, performing politeness, serving country, imagining non-country, bird's view of borders, pacifist view of conflict, embracing animality, embodying an alternative. And I'll just also say that for each of those bolded sections, they were connected to, for me, the power of this collaboration, thinking about the strong figures, strong and feminine and animalistic figures being carved out of wood, which is natural, thinking about the power of the performance, because there was a performance piece that I think Donna mentioned a little bit earlier, thinking about the animation, thinking about the futuristic ideas that come through these comic books and into films and into the talk of, you may have already mentioned the astrophysicist who visited the conversation. So it really, to me, like those bolded words represented something much broader about the collaboration in addition to the pieces. Thank you. I'm glad to be here and look forward to hearing what the students and you all are doing and the work ongoing.
Thank you so much. That was really beautiful. Thanks for sharing your poem with us.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Melchor. It's just been amazing and just such a great collaboration, and has shared so much. Your words have put so much into these animations. So from that is what Donna refers to as word soup. So I've done word soup for each one of the for each one of the models that we've animated so far, and they're all done in the same color as that would represent them or that has their tattoo. And one of the things that that occurred to me in doing this, and actually this comes from a conversation that Melchor and I had, that is how words are placed next to each other will really change their meaning. And so in these word soups, I've tried to rearrange the words so that they have different meanings as they go through the word soup. So now we can this word soup is then made into the background, and the environment that alpha female is now in. So, and this is actually also, this is rendered by Professor Huber. So that basically takes you down the pipeline of going from sculpture to animation. And then going forward, what I'd like to do is introduce you to our interns and animators. So I want to introduce you first to Amy Hamm, who is a senior animation student at Lesley University with a minor in history. She enjoys interdisciplinary arts and animations, having made many projects in both 3D and 2D animations and mixed mediums. Her recent 2D film about seals and ocean conservation has been nominated and won several film festivals internationally lately. And that's actually Amy's junior project that she did collaboratively on a team. I can also say, since I am Amy's senior thesis faculty member, that she is well on her way to making another award-winning film in her senior thesis. So, Amy, I'd like to pass this off to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I am one of the students who worked on the project. I worked as an animator. Do you want to do slides first? So this is some of the storyboard footage that Trina sent to me for the Black Panther version of the animation. So she referenced a video of the Wakandan warriors from the Disney parks, and she sent that to me. And she also sent a model based on the sculpture that Donna made, and a spear file and a chair file. So I had sort of all the components. And this is another one of the as Katia put it, word soups based off of the poems that we had before. So I got interested in the project because Trina mentioned it to my senior class. I'll leave like most of the research details to the people who actually did the research, but I got interested because I saw her alpha female sculpture and the animation for it. And I really think it's empowering to contextualize womanhood in the way that this project does, because we're also used to mainstream depictions for societal expectations of women, women's bodies, women's actions, that it's easy to forget that the definition of women is just very diverse and empowering. So these almost act as little case studies, but also little reminders of that there's like an infinite number of definitions for women. So as I said, I did animation for the Black Panther character, who's based on the movie and also the Dahomey warriors. I basically was in charge of moving that rig around like a puppet, as Trina explained. So I looked at her storyboard and I looked at the where the weight was and where the twists were and where each limb was at any point in time, and I moved it. Is this a video? Yeah, so that's the movement, and we sent that to Kurt Vancouver, who did an amazing job with lighting and texturing and all that stuff. I learned about each of the different sculptures through this project, but also what the sculptures were based on. So as a history minor, it kind of rekindled my interest in women's history in general. And I will definitely be reading and consuming more media based on these people and characters in the future. But as an animator, I also learned more about motion as a concept and also softwares. Because with animators, you have to really be in tune with your own body, its strengths, its weaknesses, its power, etc., and to provide that visual acting. So I think that really also relates to this project as well as sort of just an examination of human form. The most difficult part was that spear trick, because we had to figure out how to make the character face the camera and hold the spear in the correct direction. So I sort of channeled that superhero energy and decided to have her do a little spear twirl, which I think emphasizes her skill with the weapon on top of that like intimidation for that war dance that she does. As far as like what I learned about women and gender through this experience, I learned all of the references, the women of the Auxiliary Corps in World War II, Civil, the Dahomey tribe, Ronnie of Jhansi, and I was sort of on an independent discourse about my own presentation as a woman when Catriona approached me about this project, because as I said, I'm a history minor, so I'm in a lot of like history courses where the only mainstream works that we're covering sort of depict women as like second-class citizens, which is very disheartening when you get so much of that media. So this is sort of like a reminder that women aren't props or MacGuffins in the story. They're like the main characters too. Yeah.
Thanks, Amy. That's amazing. So I don't know if Sienna has joined us. And if she hasn't, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about Sienna's work. So Sienna De Gregorio is also an animator at Lesley University College of Art and Design, and she is in her junior year. So I'll show you the same, she went through the same process that Amy did. So this is the storyboard that that I made for her, and these storyboards are kind of hilarious. They're hard to come by as far as making the drawings. So I took a video of Donna stepping out from behind a chair and walking, and then used some drawings of Gal Gadot from Wonder Woman to get some fighting, and then also referenced a lot of sword fight fencing references to really get that balance. And again, it's hard when you're drawing a storyboard to try to figure out how to show the weight and have it still have the same camera action. So sometimes if time was no limit, I would make one that is following the camera and then another drawing that is on the side, so you can see the profile, and that'll be a lot easier for the animators. So I think that our animators did a great job, given that both of these storyboards are from the camera's perspective. And so what I'm going to show you next is, this is the, as we go through the word soup, which is, it's much more than word soup. If you look at it, it's some wonderful messages in there. And one of my favorite lines is female, feral, feline, fertile, protector. And that just, for me, sums up this character of Sibley. So, and the magic is, how do you share that in the 10 seconds that you're going to be showing the film? But hopefully we'll be working on the lighting. I also want to say that these animations these are short concept arts and concept pieces for the to display the character of these figures of Donna's models, of her sculptures. I keep referring to it as models because that's the animation term. But we were thinking of these as the power-ups. When you don't usually, in pop culture, you don't see power-ups from women. It's usually, in games, there's people throwing axes and things like that. But here we have these power-ups of these powerful women Amazons that are showing us what their strengths are. So this is Sibley. She's going to be coming out. I'll show you her animation that Sienna did, and it is rendered and lit through Professor Huber. And one thing you'll notice about this concept piece is that Sibley is missing the dress. And that is because it will be added later, and it will have a physics simulation put onto it. So that's a much longer render. And rendering is sort of like putting your images into, like baking a cookie. You've got to let the computer figure out all the images so it can make the animation. So the simulation will take some more time. But next time you see Sibley, she will have a beautiful flowing dress on. So, and so I think that I'm going to pass this back to you, Donna. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you also, Professor Kervin Huber, for working your magic on the animations. And thank you, Amy. That was really very thoughtful reflections that you shared with us. I appreciate that. So at this point, I'm going to introduce the three students that worked really closely with Professor Baker and I all fall. Two are Brandeis students and a third is another Lesley student. So we're going to start our process was such that we decided with the student scholar partners, we would sort of break it down. So there would be a researcher, there would be someone gathering image bank images, and then there would be someone kind of sketching out these characters as we move from kind of like the sculpture to the power up, which Trina was just mentioning. Now we're thinking about what is the narrative of this short animated film going to be. And so first I'm going to introduce Serenity Augustine. She's a sophomore planning to major in creative writing and English. She's also particularly interested in pursuing visual medias of storytelling. Having been interested in stories since she was a child, her growing awareness of the world around her influenced her writing to not only inspire wonder, but to show the intricacies of human nature and to put more people of color in media. Whether cranking out an essay or developing a fictional world, she puts her heart into her work, all with the goal of making the world a better and more exciting place. Serenity, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Serenity. I was actually assigned the researcher position, which makes sense given my majors. But yeah, and given the project, we did deep dives on the individual characters, which I believe is coming up next. So yeah, first one up is Lakshmi Bai. And with this, there were a few specific topics that I was given to research on. So these are just a couple of the notes for each one. So to start off with is the Bengal Tiger. So as you know, all the statues have animal heads, and for Lakshmi Bai, we had the Bengal Tiger. So I just did a little bit of a deep dive on that. So interestingly enough, as you might have guessed, it symbolizes strength, grace, and agility, which is also represented in a lot of the characters that are tigers in pop culture. A specific one that we have mentioned at the bottom is Shere Khan. And interestingly enough, he is considered suave and charming, and he's, cocky and egotistical, but he, interestingly enough, was very protective of his friends. So that was something that, also connected with Lakshmi in her story with regards to her son. So that was very interesting. Little tidbit of connection. And then in terms of just, the Black.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Do you want me to go back?
No, it's okay. I'm good.
Okay. Sorry.
With Black Panther, up next, there was a lot of information and a lot of topics that we wanted to explore with her, which was a lot of fun, but just a few specific ones. We had the Black Panther party, given, the name Black Panther and the historical connection. And so we were able to do a little bit of a deep dive on that and, just the programs that they offered, and specifically the idea of the survival programs and its connection to Black Panther in the film. Because interestingly enough, T'Challa opens a center in California that is to support Black youth, and then that connecting to the community service programs that the Black Panther Party actually historically created. And then in terms of the Black Panther, the animal, again, connecting to the animal head, they're actually different feline animals that just are characterized by the black fur or a large concentration of black spots. And so that being what defines a Black Panther, interestingly enough. And then, we have the Venus symbol and the raised fist because of the tattoos. And so just looking at the history of how they were introduced into society as well. And then we have civilly. And I think this was actually a favorite among the leaders, but the mistress of all nature is what she was considered as. And so that being a very interesting title that we really liked. So I included that as well. And then the connection to the lion with her animal head being her constant companion, and then lion symbolizing courage, strength, and power. And they're also, interestingly enough, considered lazy. They're the laziest of, the big cats. So that was just really interesting to consider, given just how powerful and like the power associated with them. And then lionesses specifically being the hunters of the community. And I included a pun, if you'll allow it, in terms of being the main hunters. But and then, we have the segue. And interestingly enough, you might be like, why is the segue there? We were interested in creating a modern transition from like these characters into society due to their role. And so with her having the chariot, we're trying to figure out modern transportation. And one of the things that we came up with was the Segway. So just doing a little bit of a research on that as well. Yeah. In terms of just, general experiences with the projects, I first got into the project because I got an email from my screenwriting professor to the class letting us know about the opportunity. And I saw it and I really, really wanted it. And so I immediately started drafting my application and I applied. And during the interview with Donna and Lexi, I had asked, what the general narrative was about. And when they mentioned that they were trying to do, superheroines in modern society, I was like, this is what I need to do. So I was very excited about that. And that's what initially drew me in. And then just being interested in visual storytelling, as I mentioned earlier, animated films, shows, I really wanted to be able to be a part of something like this and something that has such an inspirational message. So that's what drew me in. And in terms of, again, the researcher role, just being able to work as a team and having that specific role in researching was very eye-opening and also a little bit intimidating because I never worked with other people with creative writing because, I've always done it by myself. So I was very excited to work with all these people, all these talented people, and to be able to contribute to the project. But it went really well. I was very excited and I really enjoyed working as a team. And originally we started off with just general research on each person. And I came in with a little bit of a draft of how I imagined each character would be. And then we went and did deep dives, which is what you're seeing here. It's like really big, intense research banks that I would bring to the group, and then that would be given to Pilar, and then Pilar would do her part. So just the chain of events was very cool to see and seeing like the impact of the research. And in terms of specifically, because this is, women's studies, I think it's very interesting being able to put so much like time and effort in this, specifically saying, because, we all know like the struggles that women have faced, but you don't really know, I feel like, until you do something like this, because like I knew in the back of my head, it's like, of course, but like actually seeing like the historical documentations of not only what women have been through, but how they've responded was very interesting, because I don't want to make it put in the light of just, they are suffering because they actively resisted. And like seeing the active resistance was also really inspiring and really amazing. And it really stuck with me. Yeah, it was just a great experience overall.
Great. Thank you so much, Serenity. That was really, really thoughtful to hear your reflections. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So our next student from Brandeis that I'm gonna introduce is Pilar De Vivier. She is a sophomore at Brandeis and an MLK fellow. She plans on doing a double major in psychology and studio art. She comes from a mixed race family from upstate New York. Using her own ethnic background and passion for social justice, much of her artwork focuses around identity, race, and mental illness, mainly using portraiture and figurative works to do so. As a career, she's interested in art therapy or doing some sort of research into where art and psychology overlap. She would also love to sell her work and have it shown in galleries as well. So Pilar, do you want to unmute yourself?
Sure. Hi, good evening, everyone. So my main role in this research project was to make image banks, which is basically compiling like reference images from all different sources. And, this is going to be used by Lexi, who's, our like concept artist. So this is a really good, my Lakshmi Bai section is a really good example of kind of what I did, which is get like historical art references from like databases, art history databases, and also mixing that with the more modern contemporary art. So in like the first images, it's the movies about Lakshmi Bai. And the first one is like the Hindi from the Hindi movie, it's still from the Hindi movie. And then the one next to it is the more Americanized versions. So I'm trying to get multiple perspectives as well as from like multiple timelines. So there's like photos, there's prints, there's etchings, there's the last two are both from the Met. So I'm trying to get, art that's historically relevant and in museums that, people can see as well. And we also know the artist for sure. because when you just go on Google and you're looking up these people, it's not giving you enough information. You want to know the artist, you want to know the context, and you just want to get as much information as you can. That I think it's all really helpful just to see visually the history. So I also this is one of my favorite ones to do with Black Panther, partly because I've done like a personal research about it in my free time, and my father actually his like thesis was on like American civil rights movements in like the 1960s. So I grew up learning about this stuff as well. So this is specific about the raised fist, the where the raised fist like as a symbol came from, and you can see there's like Spanish Civil War, where like a lot of these soldiers are raising their fists like in rebellion. There's a Miss America protest, which is from the 70s, where that feminist movement is really coming into play. And then now it's so much a part of our modern history in the protests that's been happening the last decade. And these are really powerful photos, and I really like doing research about the race fist specifically because it's just so fascinating that it's been around since like the 1800s, and it has such a prominence, and it's really important that we know where this symbol comes from. And this is a good example of a lot of the art history research that I do. So this is for Sibley's chariot, and chariots have been like in many different ancient civilizations. And from like way back, like the earliest one was which is like a drawing from Mesopotamia, and they're horse-drawn chariots. So, and there's one recently in the first images, they've just uncovered like a Celtic chariot, and they're like uncovering the fragments right now. And it was super fascinating to like go through these articles and read about all these excavations. And the Egyptians have it, ancient China has it. And it's really fascinating to see that like all cross-continental these like inventions exist. And it's, I don't know, something about that is really just eye-opening to know that, all these people who were living in different times, like vastly far away without any, like the internet where you have instant connection, all kind of having some similarities. I just find that so fascinating. And it's also so helpful just to, as like a perspective wise, to get different ideas of what a chariot could look like for our the renderings or the drawings that Lexi's going to do, and it's going to be developed later. So yeah. And in terms of what I learned throughout this whole process, I mostly do fine arts. I'm primarily a painter. I do some drawings as well, but I mean, I've tried pretty much everything, honestly. I've done graphic design work as well. So all that can be kind of like a solo process. So to really be a part of a team is really, really eye-opening, because Serenity does research on things that maybe I would have never thought of. And then I grab images that maybe people wouldn't have gravitated towards. And then you're also like different people are giving me ideas to where I can fill in holes for like, it was really eye-opening, because I think a lot of people, including myself, used to have this perspective that art is like a solo thing. It's like one artist making their thing and that's it. But it's so much different, and there's so much collaboration that you need, like just to get a project this big to come together. And it was really great to hear from everyone and learn from everyone. And I learned so much more about women's history as well, because we have this very white male centric view on history. And I think a lot of people kind of justify that rationale with like, oh, well, women just weren't like, there weren't a lot of like historical women. And Serenity's proved through her research, I proved for mine, is that that's completely untrue. There's so much women's history to be discovered, and they've had so much influence for thousands and thousands of years, and it's been really great to discover on my own through art how true that is. So it's been a pleasure to work with everyone here.
Great, thank you so much, Serenity. I'm sorry, Pilar. That was great to hear your reflections. And I had not heard the story that this is your father's interest in his research. I loved that connection came through. Yeah, and thank you for underscoring the idea of sort of all these minds working together. That's a really important part of collaboration. So our last student that I'm going to introduce tonight is Lexi Saunders. She is a junior studying illustration at Leicester University. Her artistic influences include concept art for animated movies such as Zootopia, Kung Fu Panda, and Claws. And Lexi was great. She actually interviewed the Brandeis students with me. And so she just jumped right into the project from the beginning. And I've been so lucky to work with her. Lexi, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Lexi. As you can probably tell already, I love animals. And I'm also a big fan of mythology and folklore. And this project really combines all of those aspects and more. So in the Amazons Among Us project, all of these themes sort of unite to show more of a representation of women in media, not just women, but strong women. So I'm very grateful to be working with the whole team to sort of advocate for women and human rights in a way that I know best. I mean, I've always wanted to use my art in a way that spreads a meaningful message. So using my art towards something bigger that could benefit a lot of people is really what I'm interested in. So yeah, my role in this project is to take the descriptions and the designs of the original sculptures presented to me, and I look through the image banks and I sort of translate them into a 2D design. And I also I look at the inspirations and references relating to each other, to each character, to create a more modern look, like as if these characters have stepped into the current world after being frozen in time, like a piece of art history. So the 2D designs sort of reflect an evolution of their original design if they were to step into a more modern landscape. And I still try to stay loyal to Professor Dodson's original sculpture designs so that we can still recognize which character is which, and still it doesn't stray too far from the original idea. And my main goal is to keep these Amazon warriors as iconic figures. So keeping the designs simple enough to recognize, but also interesting and relatable is pretty important for me. So as you can see here, I did a lot of iterations on like the face shape and some silhouette design. And this project has really helped me work on meeting deadlines and also taking critique and not letting myself get attached to a piece of art. It's also presented me with lots of challenges in terms of designing. Each character is very involved. Each has their own like bubble of influences and strengths. And I found that tackling these challenges has been extremely satisfying. It's also helped me to step out of my comfort zone. And with a project like this, it's really important to be in the moment and let every sketch act as a stepping stone towards the final design. It's a slow process, but very collaborative as well. So yeah, a very messy process and a lot of thinking outside the box and just getting all of my ideas on a paper, even if they're not the best idea. So yeah, I mean, this project's really opened my mind to different ways to portray strong women in character design, because strength, it's not only a physical attribute. You know, it can you can represent strength in empathy, courage, resilience. There's so many ways to represent strength. And I've learned a lot about how to design characters that portray such deep conceptual ideas, which is really the heart of this project, I think. You know, there's a lot more to these characters than their outside appearances. There's a lot of influences and, you know, art history, that a lot of research has gone into these characters. And so for me, in order to portray these concepts in a way that's easy to look at, is by you know, using clothing, props, posing, and you know, even color palette to sort of communicate these ideas. And yeah, it's been a great challenge, and I'm really looking forward to continuing working on this project and seeing the final outcome in the future. It's very exciting for me. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Lexi. And then we just kind of scrolled through 3 of the characters just to give you a sense of the process, where Lexi does an initial design, and then we kind of have a conversation, and then there's more sketches that go with it. So I think that's all the slides. I'm going to stop sharing for now. And I think what I'll just wrap up by saying, kind of highlighting and maybe even repeating some things that have been brought up, but definitely that animation is, it's a team sport. I know Professor Baker and I both feel so incredibly fortunate that we've been able to partner with a whole generation of young women on this project. I think it only can make it stronger. And also, again, the idea that, you know, I made these sculptures in my own studio by myself, and then, you know, bringing them out to a larger conversation about what they mean for other people, where people might intersect with them, whether it's, you know, resident scholar Melchor Hall, whether it's our student scholar partners or Leicester University students. What do these sculptures mean to other people, and to engage in those conversations has been really meaningful for me. I don't know, Trina, do you want to say anything else before we kind of open it up?
But yeah, I think you summed it up really beautifully, but art is made to be shared. And this really is a wonderful way of being actively sharing while we're making. So it's been a fantastic collaboration. And I'm so lucky to have worked with all these young artists as well. They're just, the input has been amazing. And also, I don't know if you can tell that the pink skirt in one of the animations actually came from the study that we did with Serenity, Pilar, and Lexi. So it's really, it's been wonderful, and just an amazing growth. So thank you.
Great. And I think we'd like to open it up if there's questions or comments. I know there's some really nice comments in the chat. Or if, yeah, if any of the students had questions for each other or comments that we didn't get to yet. I think all of your reflections are really rich in meaning and yeah. Helen, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. So this has all been wonderful, and I love seeing it. I love your sculptures. But I'm wondering, where will this be shown as an animation? It's a film, and what audience are you thinking of tapping into, and where do you think you might be able to get it shown? And I will mute myself now.
That's a great question. Where our design is that for this to be a short film, like 3 to 5 minutes. And so the Fulbright that I'm doing this spring will be in residence at the Tricky Women, Tricky Realities. So that is It's an annual film festival for women who work in animation. It takes place on International Women's Day every year in March. And so I'll be there this year. I will get to attend the festival, and I'll be working in collaboration again with our team to really script the story and the narrative, and really kind of pull these characters into a short film. So and I think I'm going to dovetail onto Melkor's question about the voting reference, and just kind of share kind of some ideas that we're having. One idea is that they all start out as statues, like forgotten statues, like public art, and that have been forgotten. People don't really know who they were, and there's like moss grown over them, and they're in different parts of the country. We did think about having each one associated not only with the power move and and different props, but also in reference to different who we consider modern day champions for different social justice issues. So the voting rights is, we were thinking about Stacey Abrams. So we were thinking of her for Sibley. So instead of a chariot, she has like a mobile voting box, that she can go and collect ballots from people. And, Black Panther, yeah, she's running for governor again. I was so excited to see that. And so Lakshmi Bai, so we've kind of just, this is like kind of, just to the moment where we're at, like thinking of different heroines for each one of these characters, to think about who they are and what they're fighting. And then like, for example, again, with Sibley, like where would she be? So we were thinking of, again, Stacey Abrams was kind of our like hero for that one. So there's this place in Georgia called Stone Mountain, and it has a very famous Confederate stone carving. So we're thinking she'd be there, about to like break out, and then they break out of their sort of stone, or bronze, like encasings, and they become these action figures. And so they work together to do something. And so we're still, that's the next phase of this project. But it has, go ahead, sorry.
Oh,
go
sorry, I
ahead.
was going to
Yeah.
dovetail on that and just say that one of the other things we want to come across with this is that in our future animation, they don't win until they can put the intersectionality of all the feminine issues together. And that's what will make them actually grow and combine and solve issues of humanity.
And defeat the villains too. There have to be villains that they fight. And so, so it's a lot of work to get a little 3-minute thing together. But anyways, this is what we're engaged in, and we're very committed to it. So yeah, Pilar, did you want to say anything else about Stacey?
No, I'm just very excited for her to run. And I have a lot of friends here from Atlanta, so I'm gonna make sure they all vote for Stacey.
Great. Let's see. Any other? Yeah, go ahead.
Can I be heard?
Yes, you are heard.
Oh my God, I don't know. Well, anyway, congratulations to both of you. My name is Scatter Goodmore. For the rest of you, actually, I've done a couple of collaborative things over at Brandeis with this particular group. So one with Roberta Paul, and but it's very exciting. Happy to see you all working and doing some creative stuff. So my best to you all. Okay. I don't really know what the hell is going on with the communication part of this, but evidently you can hear me, so I'll try not to be too obscene. All right, good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks. I just want to say thank you also and share with the group that Scat is the reason that I'm in art. He was my high school art teacher. and is the first teacher that told me that this is a field that that maybe I should stay in. So if it wasn't for Scott, I wouldn't be doing it now. So thank you, Scott.
Yeah, and I was going to ask Professor Huber, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about what it's been like to support this project or collaborate with all of your wizardry and skills.
Sure. Yeah. I guess you caught me off guard, but well, yeah, it's fun. It's fun. You know, I do mostly commercial visual effects work. So when I have time to just kind of, you know, get on a project like this where we can just sort of be creative, and I don't have like a crazy art director evaluating every little thing we do. It's a nice relief. So I guess that's about the most I can say of it, is that it is a lot of fun to you know, work on things that are more creative and more art focused as opposed to being a commercial project.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was a great comment. Thank you so much. And sorry to catch you off guard. And thanks for being willing to jump in spontaneously.
Sure.
And so I think Susan Eisenberg.
I had two questions. So it's very exciting. Two questions just about the heroine idea of that it seems very war-based, like the imagery, and that seems like not necessarily how I would conceive of what's heroic. You know, if I think of the civil rights movement, I think of the stick workers who were nonviolent, who took enormous courage to do what they did. So it seems like kind of a traditional idea of what's heroic, and putting women in that role. So that was interesting when you know, it was mentioned that that's not limited to that, and you know, the Stacey Abrams concept and voting, you know, came up. So that is one question. And then I guess the other question that I have about the heroine idea, or is it's sort of, I feel like people that I know who have done heroic, you know, what one might call heroic things, are very often don't feel comfortable with that designation because they're aware of the kind of compromises or ugly things that were done in the process of what's the public, you know, that how does that really work in reality, and what's the underbelly of that. And it's not like that sort of, nothing is just that one thing of heroic, how we imagine in a, you know, a cartoon, but of, you know, has a lot of, you know, what you turned away from or what you didn't do, who you sold out in a sense. And then also just that larger idea of collective change versus an individual, you know, was it Martin Luther King or was it a whole movement? You know, that you know, that in Hollywood, you know, in our culture, it's always like one person against the, you know, all the adversaries. And if you have family or friends, they're eliminated as the movie progresses. So, you know, as opposed to like the Magnificent Seven sort of model. So just, so I also, you know, within like, I felt like the work is very exciting and moving, but those are, you know, questions, I guess, that I have about that concept.
Mm-hmm. I think those are great questions, you know, definitely some pitfalls to steer away from. And I think Trina hinted at the idea of the intersectionality, kind of trying to steer away from, you know, like white saviorism or, you know, the lone sort of heroine, you know, in this case. And so the idea of like, it's more about the working together that unleashes, you know, maybe their superpowers. And we've also taught, you mentioned, yeah, the axes and the militaristic. We've talked about maybe that's like the trailer. I guess we see the power up as like the trailer, and then the animation would be you know, takes those, you know, into a story. So maybe the story is, you know, those axes that Sibley has, you know, maybe they're ballots or pens that she's handing out. So maybe they're not actually weaponry, like maybe they're not, you know, another one we thought of for Black Panther is the idea of Angela Davis and prison reform. So we thought like each one would have this social justice issue that is sort of like their issue. And then when they come together, and then of course, we've thought of Tomris because she's a snake, maybe her fight is for clean water. And so maybe her statue is in like Flint, Michigan, and she comes to life. And so it's more, I think, a little bit more magical and metaphorical than like literally weaponry in a war. You know, whether that's used symbolically or metaphorically or violently, you know, definitely aware of things that we want to avoid and try and explore creative territory that maybe hasn't been. Oh yeah, sorry, go Trina.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that the original Amazons that we were modeling these from they fought their battles on the battlefield, but for modern Amazons, these are new battlefields are in Congress, and they are, you know, in the fighting for the environment. So Amazonian women have changed and shifted depending on what is needed. And so we're sort of also giving a nod to the history of women, of the women's rights and the women's movements over the centuries in this. And I want to sort of jump back to, there's a question for Nancy Ballard that was asking about the villain being going to be a concept or a person. It's a concept that may be that will have a appearance as an object or a person, and that's where Lexi comes in as a wonderful concept artist. So we are going to be working on that for the next stage. I'll pass it back to you, Donna.
I see there's a question from Kenyatta David. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask it?
Yes. I have a question as it concerns to the world building. Is there any sort of social hierarchy? And if so, with said social hierarchy, do you have a group of terrorists, for instance, or even anarchists that are kind of against the entire ordeals going on in the world? And another thing that I wanted to ask, it always interests me. Usually in anthropomorphic world, they don't really show the cuisine, but then I always think in the animal kingdom, there's predators and prey. Is there sort of a disparity between animals classified as predators and animals classified as well, herbivores? And what are the foods that they would eat in this case? So there's a controversy.
That's a great question. Well, I'm a vegetarian, so I have sympathy for the herbivores amongst the group of animals. That's a great question. I'm not sure we've gotten that far in terms of character development, but you raise a good issue of kind of like none of these animals or, you know, inspirations for us exist in a vacuum, right? So in thinking, how do they relate with each other? And I think we see them more set in a imaginary world in a way, because they're imaginary, right? Like animal-headed people don't really exist. So there's sort of a creative leap that goes with working with this vocabulary. But I think it has to be grounded, as Trina was saying, kind of in the current moment, in the world, somewhat the way we understand it. And what else did you ask about? War?
No, well, from what you just mentioned, based off that subject in which you're saying the world is not confined to ours at all, I was gonna ask, well, there's obviously a lot of political tensions. If there need to be well, a similar Black Panther movement, I'm not sure what the conflict is. I might have misheard it, but I was gonna ask, is there sort of an anarchist group? Because there has to be some form of hierarchy. And
oh, gotcha. Okay, the idea of anarchy. I guess our form of anarchy, we're thinking more about intersectionality, the idea that there's not necessarily one character that does it all by themselves. We were even thinking like that could be the flaw of the character, that they think like alpha female. She thinks she can do it all herself, but really she fails until she embraces the intersectionality, you know, of her other characters, that it can't be done alone. And I, you know, which that has a lot of symbolism, certainly for women's lives. We thought of her maybe dealing with, if we stick with the idea of my aunt, her military service, maybe thinking about contemporary issues in the military now. And that's always dicey. Like if one of the characters is really based on a real character, yeah, how much do you get sort of, you know, how much does that become like a ball and chain around your ankle, like you're dragging around this narrative, and how much does it limit you to your creative freedom? So again, these are all things, rich ideas that we're going to be hashing out and brainstorming and going forwards and backwards and coming up with good ideas and rejecting them, I think, in the next, you know, that would be the next iteration of this process.
I also think that these questions are great boundaries too. For every art piece, we always, you know, start with the restrictions, and then we have something to push up against. And so these are some of the restrictions that we're giving ourselves, and this is great. So good questions.
Yeah, great questions.
One more question. Well, they are animals. Do they have any physiological enhancements or cater towards them being animals? Like, I was just thinking about the idea of a vampire bat using echolocation to travel, but they'd be blind. But in this world, because there's social issues, would animals like that have to, well, they don't see normally? Would they be considered lower, or even a part of, how would they be integrated into the world? Because I could I could see a funny sort of ableism in certain animals having certain senses over others.
Yeah, that's an important point. Actually, Andy Moorline, my husband, found this article that it kind of critiques the animated, you know, the history of animation, and that a lot, or live action movies or superhero movies, a lot of times the villains are really you know, disabled in some way, and sort of then they're thought of as really evil, and sort of how there's a whole ableism that goes with superhero movies. So there's definitely a lot more research, I think, in front of us in terms of thinking about things we want to avoid, and stories that we want to tell. And I think they're really almost magical. I think we think of superheroes more as magic, whether it's you know, extraordinary courage, or, you know, there's a famous quote about the Amazons where they say the Amazons were considered more like men because of their courage than women because of their sex. And so I think there's a lot to unpack, again, you know, when we think about these stories and these concepts and these ideas, and how will they actually be translated, and what world will they live in? You know, certainly Melkor's poems gave us you know, huge inspiration for thinking about each one of their, you know, psyche, or and so I think there's a lot more work ahead of us, basically. Trina, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you're exactly right. There's building a story is really complex. And as you can see, it's why we use a team and do the research. So it's just exciting to see where it grows. It grows like its own being too. Like once you start the animation process, it has its own personality and will grow like I keep wanting to say like a kid, but maybe like a puppy, but yeah, it'll grow and take on its own personality.
Great.
One more small question, sorry. I noticed that all the animals that were showcased for land animals, is there different, like, I guess, societies based off the type of animals there are? Because I noticed that you had amphibians and mammals on land. Is there, for instance, a aquatic kingdom or continent or state or country?
I think in that sense, I feel confident saying that I think they're going to be on land, because I think they're going to as I said, right now we're thinking more about social justice issues. So it's more like how that world intersects with what we would say is like our world of humans.
Okay.
Thanks. Those are really great questions. I think we're running really close to running out of time. I don't know if there's like a final comment from any of the students or a final question that I'm just missing because I've not seen your hand. Kristen, what do you think?
I think that we are good. I don't see any hands raised in the search button. I think everyone has asked a lot of thoughtful questions, received insightful answers. I thank you all very much for your time. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Trina. Thank you to all the students and everyone who attended tonight. I wish everyone a good evening. And if anyone has any questions, you can always feel free to email me after the presentation. My email is mullin@brandeis.edu. So thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pilar and
you all.
Serenity.
Thank you very
Lexi
much,
and
Donna.
Amy.
You
Thank
guys
you,
are
Donna. It's
amazing.
Annette. That was just very exciting, Donna. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming. Really
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Donna.
Great. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful project. I'm also interested in what's not said sometimes and what's the missing pieces in a creative piece. Like it's always interesting to think about too, like what's left in between the lines somehow. The animation, but this is a great project. Thank you.
Thank you.